think we are live. Great to have everyone with us. Big welcome. We'll let everybody in. 45. Look at this. We're racing up. I think we've got a few hundred people signed up for today. We'd expect maybe about 100 people in the room and maybe 100 others to watch online. Yeah, morning from a very warm Bristol. I'm in one of these kind of soundproof booths, which is currently, I don't know, I've not got a thermometer here, but I'm guessing it's like 30 degrees. So if you see me sweating, that is why, but I've got water on hand, so we're all good. We're all good. Yeah, big morning to lots of people in the chat putting in. Yeah, morning, Nick, Laura May, Mary, Blanche, Lauren. Great to see you all. Great to see you all. Amazing, amazing. Give it a few more seconds before we come in. Lucinda, how's your temperature? I'm obviously in an air-conned office, but in like a bit of a coffin booth, it feels like. How's the temperature down in the glorious southwest in Plymouth?
I always love how British we are. Every single chat, we're always start with the weather. Absolutely. I'm hoping you can't hear, but I've got a fan on me because absolutely it is. It's lovely and sunny down in Plymouth. But yeah, a little bit toasty. So I'm hoping you can't hear the white noise, though it is quite nice and relaxing.
All good, all good. No, no, that's great. That's great. Perfect. Right. Well, I think we'll get started. Just to say a massive welcome to everyone. Obviously, today's session is all about hype to impact, thinking about kind of practical innovation, and thinking about how we can apply that innovation into real L&D challenges. And really sort of starting to think, obviously, it's not just me, it's everywhere, isn't it? The noise around innovation is huge, whether it's AI, whether it's new tools. Every day there seems to be new noise about digital learning tools out there. And today, what we want to do is really sort of demystify that for us in the sort of digital L&D community, thinking around how do we, as L&D professionals in organizations, use and harness this innovation in the best possible way to drive business impact for our organizations and to solve real business challenges. So that's where we're going to go today. Just as a welcome and a hello from me. So my name's Jack Shepherd. I head up our bespoke content sales team. So essentially what that means is I've got accountability for all of our amazing bespoke e-learning customers over here at Kallidus. And joined by Lucinda. Lucinda, do you want to just give a quick introduction and a hello?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I'm Lucinda Hensley, and I head up the Learning Solutions team here at Kallidus Bespoke Content. So essentially what we do is we consult with clients to understand really what your business needs are, and then help translate those to the learning need, and then of course come up with the creative solutions to meet that need for clients. And I suppose that's to some extent what we're going to be talking you through today is how we come up with some of those creative approaches and the innovative ones that we've been working on recently.
Amazing, amazing, perfect. So, I suppose just to share and shape where we're going to go today, if we go to the next slide, we can see the agenda. What we're going to be doing today is we want today to be really practical for you. We want today also to be engaging. It's warm, it's hot, not just for me in this coffin box, but it's warm and hot for everyone else out there as well. So please do. We want this to be interactive, helpful. So use the chat, ask questions. Hopefully either Lucinda or I will get back to you as one of us is talking and the other one sort of monitoring the chat function there as well. But where we're going to go today is thinking about how we can use innovation to really kind of make it meaningful, how we can use innovation to drive engagement with our learners and our audiences, how we can use innovation to embed behavioral change within organizations, how we can actually use innovation to elevate the solutions that we're offering out to our audiences, to our colleagues, to our learners, to our business without elevating the budget. How do we go further but for less? And then at the end, really thinking about how do we measure the impact of innovation as well. So that's where we're going to go. And that's the shape of our session this morning. But really, just to kick us off, we wanted to ask you a question. And there'll be a poll coming up here. Hopefully that will appear. Ah, there we go. Intro. So in digital learning, here's your question. Which of the following do you believe are the most important? So obviously, when it comes to creating learning experiences, there'll be loads of things that we'll think about. Is it the content, just the information? Is it the creative approach? Is it both? Or does it really kind of depend on the audience and the topic? We'll give just a few seconds just to kind of jump in and answer that. But it'd be really interesting to hear that and to hear opinions before we dive into the session as well. And Lucinda, obviously, there's lots of noise at the moment around innovation. Why do you think, given the noise, this is a really helpful question to kind of get us thinking and get us started this morning?
Absolutely. So as we were kind of preparing for this webinar, I've been scrolling through LinkedIn, and there is such a debate at the moment. I mean, I think the debate's always been there, but it seems really kind of focused at the moment on, is it worth doing creative approaches? Is it actually better to just have like a really simple to the point course that purely focuses on the content? Or actually, is there benefit of investing in the creative approaches, doing nice designs, interactions, putting in the mechanics that we know work, but people are still kind of debating if it's worthwhile doing that, if it's a distraction or if it's a benefit. So to almost frame our session, we wanted to hear what are all of your opinions, and then obviously we can talk you through our own. And very nicely, it looks like we're all majoritively in alignment.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think that's really important, isn't it? When it comes to learning, really thinking about both the content, the information, as we say, content is king. It's great to innovate and have an amazing creative approach, but if the content is not the right content, if it's not teaching the right information or behaviors, we fall at the first hurdle. But of course, both of them absolutely have to be played in tandem. And obviously then a few there at the end, just obviously it depends on the audience, the topic, maybe how we kind of combine them. But yeah, absolutely. We'll close that down and then we'll move into the next bit.
Absolutely. So as we've kind of just seen there, creativity and content, there is always that kind of discussion of almost like, should it be one or the other? But our view is very much that content, so almost like the substance, is very critical. But actually, style or creativity, as Jack was just saying there, it does play a huge role in the learning experience. But it's really nice to see that the majority of people are on this call kind of in alignment with that. And for anyone who's not quite, hopefully over the next hour, we can convince you that, our view is very much that the two really should go hand in hand. And part of that is, first of all, the creative approach can have a huge influence on how people react to and engage with a course, which then links into if people actually take in the information we cover, how well they retain it. You can definitely argue that the style of a course does actually link into how we kind of understand content, how we retain it in our memory. But then also in terms of the way that we creatively bring the story of the content to life, how we kind of show the context of it, how we design the interactions within a course, all of that, which you can argue is the style part, has a massive impact on how people digest the content that we explore, and then really critically on their ability to then apply that information. And it's that application that creates results and makes the learning a worthwhile investment. So the question we were almost thinking of with this is, should it be style or should it be substance? And in our view, it's a case of actually that's not the question we want to be asking. What we want to be asking is, how do we use style? How do we use creative approaches to bring to life and embed the substance or the content, so to speak? So that's almost what our framing for today is going to be. And with all of that, where we almost wanted to start is that piece we talked about of how do we make sure that innovations are meaningful? So in other words, how do we make sure that when we're designing a learning course, we are designing for impact? And as with all learning, from our perspective, it all comes down to a really robust learning needs analysis. So this isn't something that's unique to innovation by any means, but when we're looking at where we want to innovate, it's particularly important for making sure we're doing that in a really meaningful way. So to start with, we always want to start by looking at the business goal. So what has made you decide that a piece of learning that you're looking at is needed? So what have we seen, or what has changed that's driving the need for that learning? What are we actually seeing is the impact on the business of not having learning there around that topic? And then what we want to do is map out to identify the gap of almost where things are right now. What is the problem that we're seeing compared to, well, where could we be if we were to fix this problem, if we were to bring a solution in for this, and make sure that we really have the data to understand what does that gap look like? Because knowing the size of that gap is really critical for identifying almost how much is worth investing in a solution. And that's the critical first step for then understanding almost like the guide for our innovation journey is how big an innovation is worth doing. Is it worth innovating for this piece? And that's almost the first point of making sure innovation is meaningful. Then what we want to do is look a step deeper at why does that learning need exist? So why are we not already working at optimal performance as an organization? So what are people doing right now that means the business isn't where you want it to be? And to reach the goal that we've just set, what do we need people to be doing differently? And one of the parts that I always go on about with this is like I title this behaviors very purposefully because we really want to be looking at the actions, the behaviors that we need people to be doing to do differently, not just what we think that, they need to know or understand or be aware of, which I think is a really common trap when we're doing learning needs analysis. We really need to be kind of challenging ourselves to think about what do we actually need people to do differently to drive organizational change. Then after we've gone through the behaviors, we want to start identifying not just what people need to do to kind of be explored within the learning. By identifying the behaviors, it also kind of talks us through how we need to cover that information. So thinking back to where I was saying with the style, how it impacts the way that people learn, this is where we can start informing that. And then, of course, whenever we're thinking about behaviors, we need to think about the people whose behaviors it is that we're trying to change, and how the audience themselves are really going to contribute to all of this. And obviously, when we look at analyzing an audience, there's the typical things that we look at around like roles and demographics. But when we're talking about analyzing to understand innovation, what we really need to do as well is tap into what motivates the audience. So what's going to drive them to care about this training, to engage with it, and to feel motivated to not just, engage as they go through the learning, but to actually be convinced to apply the learnings after the training as well. And again, what's really important here is being really honest with ourselves as we do this and making sure we challenge the perceptions of almost what we want them to be motivated by and be led by what they actually care about. So absolutely, there are some audience groups that are motivated by things like organizational values and the performance of their teams. But then some other audiences, they may literally just want to get in and out through their day, avoid getting in trouble, get their paychecks. And that's not a bad thing by any means, but it's really critical for us to understand with the audience groups we're looking at, which are their motivations, because then it lets us know, are they going to respond really well to something that really taps into those drivers, that frames them in a really dynamic way? Or actually, would they appreciate some kind of creative approaches, provided it's still as quick a course to get through as possible for them? So it's really important we understand the audience and what drives them, so we know that the innovations that we put into place are something that's actually going to resonate with them, and we're not just being driven by us as designers wanting to do something cool and whizzy. And then finally, the last part that we always need to think about is the learning environment. And I see this part quite often fall off when we look at learning needs analysis. It can be sometimes a bit of like an afterthought, but actually we really have to consider, how are people accessing their learning? So to some extent, that's the physical stuff around, the devices that they're using to access the training. If they're going to be doing this surrounded by people or by themselves, if they're going to have a nice quiet environment where they can maybe play audio, or are they going to be surrounded by distractions and they're just, not going to be able to play things out loud? We need to understand that so we know what creative approaches we can take that are going to be kind of accessible for them, but then also looking beyond the physical to almost like the wider environment that their learning sits within. So thinking about, are we really going to be competing for the learner's attention against lots of other modules? Like, is it a really cluttered learning culture where actually, if we want this learning to stand out, we're going to have to make some noise about it and do something that looks and feels a little bit different? Are they going to have dedicated time to take this training, or are they going to have to find time for it within their own schedule? In which case, we're going to need to make sure that those first 5 seconds properly grab their attention. And maybe we even need to hit them slightly before that to convince them that this is going to be a good use of their time. Are they going to be taking this during a high stress period? Like, is this part of onboarding or preparation for a new task? Or is this just like a compliance piece they can do as they go along? All of those things are really important for us to tap into as we think about the creative design of a training, because it really then changes the approach that we might want to make. Because when we think about the way we design learning, you'll hear Jack and I, we most frequently will refer to it as a solution rather than a module, because in our minds, that's what learning is. It's finding a challenge and then going, right, this is how we help people overcome it. And the same is with the creative approach. And when we look at innovation is, right, what challenges are we facing in terms of how we engage or build learners' capabilities? Or what are the challenges we're facing, kind of how we do that? And then where can we use innovation to overcome everything?
Yeah, it's a lovely framework, Lucinda. And I think if you maybe just hold there, and I suppose for people watching, do feel free to take this, to think about this, to grab a screenshot. Obviously, I think we'll circulate these slides after the session as well. But, I think this is a really good framework as a starting point. Obviously, each of these have loads of subcategories to go into, but hopefully as a starting point are the four key pillars that are absolutely essential when it comes to thinking about, fundamentally designing a solution that's going to solve a particular business challenge as well. So yeah, do feel free, grab screenshots, and again, we'll circulate this afterwards as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I like that you called out about the subsets, Jack, because I wish this was something that you could do for every learning piece in about 10 minutes, as we just talked through there. Obviously, doing this in reality takes a little bit longer than that, and there's a few more things to go into, but almost just wanted to highlight, as we talk about innovation in particular for learning needs analysis, these are the parts that are either really key or the parts that I think sometimes get missed. We just really wanted to highlight those for you.
Might not make great webinar content, Lucinda, if we hear you go through all the subcategories for about 2 hours. I think,
I
yeah,
completely
particularly
disagree with that. I think that sounds absolutely thrilling. That's my idea of a good time.
well, there we
People
are.
might disagree, but there we go. So taking that, then what we wanted to do is just talk a little bit around then, with all that in mind, now if we know how we can decide where's worth innovating, what does innovation almost actually mean? Because I think that there's definitely a perception people have in their heads when we say innovation that you do think, oh, cool, whizzy, fizz, bang stuff, like all the bells and whistles. But how do we think of innovation when we're thinking of that marriage of style and substance? So that really brings us to almost like a little quote that we've come up with ourselves of what innovation means to us here at Kallidus Bespoke Content. So for us, innovation is absolutely about enhancing the learner's experience. So doing some of those really cool new approaches that make a learning really stand out, but making sure it's always really designed to meet the learning need, that we've always got a really clear justification for why we're doing it. But sometimes innovation is really useful for situations where we know what the optimal learning experience would be, but maybe it feels a little bit out of reach to design. Maybe that's because of budget or because of timelines. But, there's loads of different blockers that could be faced there. So for us, innovation is absolutely about enhancing experiences, but it's also about revolutionizing the way that we actually design and develop those experiences to make the approaches that, may previously have been out of reach, suddenly making them an option to implement. And that will hopefully kind of frame up some of what we're going to talk through today as we take you for a bit on each side of that, really. Some of the cool stuff we've been doing, but then also some of the cool ways we've been doing it.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Right, yeah, let's jump into some examples, and I suppose just to caveat a few of these, there'll be some examples just from client confidentiality. We're not able to share the specifics of the modules, but we've kindly been given permission to show little snippets of sections of the modules and give some statistics, but not maybe go into as much depth. But hopefully today we wanted to provide obviously that substance as well. So yeah, we'll jump into the first one.
Amazing. So where we wanted to start, as we said, was innovating to drive engagement. And in a way, what we're almost doing with this is coming back to the basics of innovation in a way. So what we've been looking at is how gamification is used to drive engagement and what the innovative twist on this can be. And obviously, gamification is something that's been talked about in the digital learning space for a long time. But absolutely, from our perspective, that doesn't mean we can't continue to innovate in this space and look at new things we can do. So obviously, we're doing like the typical things, coming up with new narratives, mechanics, multiplayer functionalities. There's all those cool things we can do in terms of what that gamification is. But to offer you something a little bit different today, we wanted to talk to you around how you can use gamification in a different way within learning. And for us, what that's been is looking at gamification as almost like a campaign tool. So in some instances, that's been using standalone games to show people, why they need to engage with a learning program. So almost using it to preface as a way to kind of show, this is how you're going to get benefit out of doing this training. So go ahead and do it. In others, it's been where people know and they're capable of doing something. The learning needs analysis tell us that people actually have all the knowledge and the capabilities they need. They just haven't been convinced to actually transfer that into application in their day-to-day work. So gamification has been really useful there. And in other places, it's been where there's going to be like a new system that's going to be launched. There's a bit of nervousness of how people are going to react. We've wanted to do something a little bit different to make sure that people really latch onto that new system and take it on board really quickly. And so using gamification as a campaign there has been really beneficial. So we'll absolutely show you a couple of examples of what this looks like in a minute. But I wanted to start by just talking through how do we know that this works and isn't just a novelty approach where Jack and I have gone, oh, this would be really fun to do a game here. That sounds a little bit different. So the reasons essentially that we know gamification works as a learning tool, but specifically as a campaign tool, realistically, organizations are expecting more and more from their people. Like we're asking people to develop new skills, optimize their ways of working, comply with, ever-changing regulations. And so to try and support them, a lot of organizations are giving them more learning. They're sending out more communications on social platforms. And the end result is that, yes, we're trying to support learners, but it means that they become really overwhelmed with modules and constant communications. So gamifying experiences and gamifying campaigns is a really fantastic way to cut through all of that noise, capture people's attention. Games really do stand out. They look really interesting to engage with. They get people talking. So it's a really fantastic way if there's some key messaging that needs to get across to make sure that it doesn't get missed because it does cut through that overload. Secondly, I am a big believer in the old adage of show, don't tell. Jack's heard me say that 1,000,001 times, as has anyone else on the call that's ever worked with me. And for me, that's absolutely exemplified when it comes to gamification. When you design games in the right way, it allows learners to have that first-hand experience of a concept, which makes it really tangible. It really convinces them as well of the benefits of doing things in a certain way, which makes a game so much more impactful as a campaign tool because they're being able to kind of experience that themselves rather than having to trust in, like a simple message approach that someone else has kind of pushed across to them. So it allows them to have that kind of autonomy in deciding the benefits are for them. And depending on what the campaign is for as well, you can absolutely start to infuse some of the behavioral elements into the game as well. So people potentially, even without realizing it, are starting to learn the knowledge that they need, build the capabilities they need, and even start to build the habits through the game because it's such a great way of really making them stick for people. And then finally, there is always the discussion of how do we create a pull learning culture versus a push learning culture? So how do we get people almost wanting to take training rather than having to assign 1,000,001 things to them in the LMS and kind of whack them with a stick until they go ahead and take it? And driving that pull learning culture, that's where gamification is absolutely successful, is because it's something that people tend to want to engage with. It makes learning a lot less of a chore, a lot more entertaining to go through. And critically, it also drives that repeat exploration. People come back to games again and again, and we know that repetition is something that really instills knowledge. It really combats the forgetting curve. It's something that makes something much more sticky and embedded. So games really work for learning, but also learning campaigns. So for the pre-facing, but also for continuous learning cycles after something else has been launched. And just so that you don't have to take my word for it, we've got a couple of data points that Jack will talk you through of some games that we've launched previously and how they landed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to kind of gamification, I think we can be a bit polarized. One of the really great statistics we gathered from a massive campaign that we rolled out last year, and we're subsequently doing another kind of game off the back of it, is 92% of this global workforce, hundreds of thousands of people, said that they either liked or loved the new, brand new kind of gamified approach that they'd never seen at like a corporate level before, within one of our larger customers. And so I think that just goes to say and show that for us, actually people do respond well to gamification when it's done in the right way, when the tone of it aligns with the organizational culture and the values, again, all of those things that we thought of earlier on as well. And actually what's really cool of that game, and as we've seen across different organizations and that organization, was that over 60% of people then went back and replayed the game. The amount of time and the amount of processes big organizations have to push people to do their mandatory training because they just don't want to do it. Wouldn't it be amazing if there was a culture where people actually wanted to go and learn, where they actively sought out opportunities to repeat, to go through those games again, and look at those as well. So yeah, really, really exciting. And so let me just share my screen quickly, and I will show you some examples of what that has looked like. So let me share this as well. Great. So hopefully this tab at the top should just disappear. So what we've got here is a project that we did for DHL, obviously one of our larger customers. We did a session with them last year around gamification as well. But this was a new game that we've launched with them all around one of their new kind of systems and a new kind of cultural movement that they've got around career development and walking and journeying through their career at DHL. Obviously, it's a massive global organization. So actually for them, retaining talent, retaining people within their organization is absolutely critical to that success. And so rather than just tell them, and they launched a new system as part of this, there was a big comms campaign. This led through everything from learning to talent acquisition to HR and beyond. But rather than just telling them and having a normal comms campaign, we actually rolled out this really cool gamified experience, kind of like a cyberpunk type theme. It was quite fun coming up with the ideas. Obviously, Lucinda, I know you were the brainchild behind this, but really kind of focusing in on different ways in which we can showcase kind of the different cultural narratives that we wanted to create as part of this. So there are four sections. We're not able to go into it in a huge amount of depth, but we've got four different zones with four different kind of narrative characters. And then as we go through those, as you can see briefly here from one of these hex games, each of them then showcase a little bit around kind of one of the key messages that they wanted to instill. So here it was about plotting your career. So it's about how do we go into a different journey, answer some questions, and think about this kind of space style theme, the Star Wars type interaction. How do we plot our journey through the career of our time over at DHL? Now, obviously, that's really exciting and really cool. I'm conscious, obviously, though, that across our customer base and kind of future customer base here at Kallidus as well, is actually at different organizational levels, there'll be opportunities to build really cool things like this, but also there'll be kind of that desire for, great, how do I create that sort of impact with a lower cost solution? And I don't know why actually all these examples are space themed. I don't
I
know if
was
it was
just
just
thinking that.
something in the water at the time, maybe. But this is something cool that we built for another organization. But actually, as you can see, there's no specific text here. This is lorem ipsum. And the reason that we've got lorem ipsum text is because these are actually gamified templates that we've created for that organization. So actually, these are lower cost, simple templated games that we've designed for large and small organizations that they can reuse and repeat and create and roll out across different business units at obviously a fraction of the price. So when we build and design games and we give them over to organizations, that's their intellectual property. And obviously, as we can see here, I can go in, I can click. We've got again the space theme here. We've got the board game experience here as well. We've got kind of a jigsaw experience. So yeah, there's so much that can be done in terms of those kind of higher, kind of more innovative experiential games, and then obviously these sort of more lower cost, more lower cost templated solutions as well.
Absolutely. And
Um,
I think when we think about games, sometimes we think that they have to be very much like a fully, it's funny to say this as a bespoke team, but they have to be fully bespoke to like a specific learning need. But I think those are a great example of where you can absolutely create like a single framework for a game and then keep using it in different situations, and you can always change the designs of them slightly as you go through as well. So for organizations where, maybe gamification is something new, it's a really great way to almost dip your toe in the water. And I can see that we've had a question come through, which is almost how do you do this when leaders in a firm are more in favor of traditional kind of tell sessions for learning? And I think whenever we've faced that blocker when we've spoken to clients, it's been really helpful to almost look at, well, how impactful have those sessions been where they've done them in that way before? Look at some of the data of where we've done games previously and look at some of the science behind games of why they work, and then almost just kind of run through with those teams. Right, well, this is the impact we've been able to make previously with those more traditional approaches. But actually, this is what could be opened up if we were open to trying something a little bit different and new. And one of the other things I always come down to is, as learning designers and the people involved in creating learning, I think we can definitely get a little distracted by our own wants and desires. We can get a bit distracted of, well, I'd really enjoy this. This is really cool. This would work really well for me in the way that I like to enjoy learning. But actually, what we want to do is we want to really think about, okay, well, what about the people we're designing for? What do the audience actually want for this training? So I suppose the other piece of advice I'd give would be, reach out to the audience group instead of trying to kind of convince somebody, well, this is what I think the audience wants. Do a survey with an example of that audience group that you're trying to get a gamified approach for. Go have interviews with them, talk to them, see what they would appreciate. And then you've almost got that as a really great argument for this isn't just what I want to do. This is what the audience are asking for and is going to drive them to engage with our learning.
Amazing, amazing. Lucinda, I'll let you take back control of the screen. And while you do that, just as a thought from me on that is, I suppose we'll talk about it at the end, but like micro experiments are a great way of doing that as well. So in that instance, I think, yeah, experimenting small, like it's the whole thing of experimentation. Experiment small, gather data. Again, it's something we'll talk about later, and let data tell the story rather than it be more of an emotional conversation where it's two people's opinions going at each other. Let data be the key driver for that. And I think again, culturally, that was what was a real success within DHL as the example, where we rolled out something, the feedback was immense. It was really positive. They'd not done anything like it. And culturally now they've got the game hub, they've got yeah, they've rolled out, multiple games off the back of it as well, because culturally it was seen as something that the audience responded really, really well to, and it drove real behavior change as well. Anyway, right. I
Yeah.
promise we'll stop talking about gamification.
Not at all. And to be fair, that hopefully, Meg, I can see your question in the chat around kind of, introducing something innovative as, that's a bit more of like a formal environment. I think actually what we're going to go on to next, to some extent, will answer that for you. But if it doesn't, please ask us to kind of explain in more detail. But the next thing that we want to talk about was AI-powered rehearsal simulations. And as this is a 2025 webinar, obviously we're not going to go a full hour without mentioning, everyone's favorite current buzzword of AI. But just wanted to touch on it to almost say that it can definitely feel at the moment like AI is, it's everywhere. It's being used almost for the sake of it in some places, just so that everyone can say that they are on the trend. But genuinely, when we look at some of the learning challenges organizations face, AI genuinely offers us a really great way to optimize the learning experience. And one place that we're really seeing that is in the way that we get learners practicing applying content in like dedicated rehearsal spaces. The reason this works really well is because often we do expect learners to kind of learn something in the digital space, really lovely supported environment, maybe answer a couple of knowledge checking questions, but then we're expecting them to autonomously navigate the huge shift into applying that information in the way that they work. So to better support learners and to make sure that they are actually doing the application of behavior that's going to lead to the results you're looking for, what we need to do is bridge that gap and build learner confidence by giving them a safe space to practice applying content where they don't have the fear of real world repercussions. Obviously, we can kind of script scenarios that, contextualize content. They're really helpful for doing this. It's a really great approach. But to truly bridge that gap and kind of almost mimic the real world challenges as closely as possible in the digital space, that's where AI can really kind of become empowering, because it allows us to design something that's much more responsive, allows learners much more free will in the solution. And again, that much more closely mimics the real world. So it's a much better stopgap for them before they move across. And as well as driving confidence, those rehearsals are critical for making sure learners are critically thinking. So getting them to consider how they actually should be using content rather than almost seeing an approach in a digital course and almost copying and pasting it across to the real world environment. We want them to be actually considering it, thinking about it, making sure that they are using it in the right way. Obviously, again, we can definitely achieve that sort of thing with really cleverly designed interactions. But the challenge that we always see is when you give learners predefined responses to a question, even if that's scripted in a really nice scenario and designed in a really nice way, the thing we are teaching them to do is choose from a preset response. We're not choosing them to specifically recall and use that piece of information themselves in the moment. Whereas when we implement AI into some of these rehearsal moments, we can allow for those free text responses that really get learners thinking in the same way we want them to in the real world. So we're much more building the habits that we actually want to see. And of course, the final part with rehearsals is it's so important to show people, okay, you've made this decision, this is the outcome of your decision. And then whether right or wrong, give them coaching to, either reinforce that or help them develop in a different way. And this is where we are truly starting to see AI shine as a tool within rehearsal spaces, because when we use AI to let people make their own decisions, we can then also use the AI to give people that really personalized feedback on the unique decisions that they made, and then give them tailored coaching on how they can improve. So as I said, we can definitely achieve this with other ways, as the data shows, but AI can absolutely enhance this.
Absolutely. And I think just to, before we jump into an example there as well, I think in terms of the way that we've seen business simulations and, rehearsal simulations be really impactful is within a previous one, around kind of business support and business management and running. Actually, we worked with a financial organization and this simulation improved their overall revenue within that year by 5.8 million as part of a broader campaign, with this kind of big learning intervention that sat alongside it, which was obviously, massive and really, really exciting for us as an organization to be part of and support with. But I think in terms of the simulation that we'll come on to now, actually, what's really exciting is we're seeing that, I think it's like 75, there was a study that came out quite recently, it's like 75% of people are nervous about really difficult conversations in the workplace. They're nervous about those hard-hitting conversations with a manager or an employee or someone they're coaching, around performance or around, conversations with a customer, for example. And so again, a big part of our thinking here is how do we utilize AI to harness and create a space to practice those human skills, not soft skills, human skills, which are going to be kind of the currency of the future, I think. How do we practice that in a safe environment where they can, have an opportunity to experience that as well? So, let me share my screen and I'll show you an example that we've been working on at the moment, with one of our.
As Jack brings that up, I see Marianne's comment of around having seen LMSs that have got the chatbots and stuff on. Kallidus's LMS is also kind of exploring that, but in bespoke content as well, we've been looking at almost being able to isolate those sorts of chatbots so that we can train them on like the documentation, on the information of like a specific organization as well. So that's something that absolutely can happen outside of LMSs. And then what we're going to show here is almost taking similar sort of functionality to what you've mentioned, Marianne, and putting it in a scenario space.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So perfect. Here what we have is a
I
prototype
don't
proof of
think that's
concept.
sharing on my screen at the moment. It might be for everyone else, but that's not coming up for me. If it's
No
coming up for everyone
worries.
else, please let me know in the chat. It might just be my computer having a bit of a moment.
How's that, Lucinda? Is that a bit
It
better?
was, it was just my computer. Ignore me.
Ah, don't worry, don't worry. Good to double check these things. Great. This is a sales simulation that we've created here. So essentially, what we've got is a bit of a web page. Jump in, click into this calendar view. This calendar view then shows you some of these conversations that you've been assigned to as a user based on your profile that you've inputted or data we've taken from a HR system or the LMS. And within it, we kind of go into one of these calls. This is a sales-based conversation. And before I jump in, I've got an overview. This is the meeting that you're having. This is the conversation we want you to do. And actually, your goal in this conversation is to cover these key priorities. This is about healthcare. This is about conversations with a healthcare professional. So it's about product benefits, demonstrating your organization's value, adapt your communication to that stakeholder, again, within customer interactions or any interpersonal interaction. It's about how do we adapt to the person we're speaking to, and then identifying their core need as well. So we'll go into it. Now, there's two options. We can either go into a text sort of based chatbot experience, sort of similar to your Copilot or your ChatGPTs. We won't go there for now because I think that's pretty common and standard, something we use across lots of our organizations. But what I'll do instead is let me just capture the right questions that I want to ask here. Perfect. So what we can actually start to do, if I click in and show this here, is I can ask this question, and I can get a chatbot based example. Let me just unshare my screen as well.
Especially in chronic conditions. There's a gap between what's planned in hospital and what actually happens in the community. We're trying to close that loop, but it's complex. Different systems, different priorities, and not enough shared insight.
Amazing. And hopefully you can hear the audio that's coming through. But essentially there, what we're able to do is we are oh, let me just go back. Sorry, apologies for this. Yeah, what we've got here then is the opportunity to have that conversation. And as we described, we've kind of synced in. There are multiple different things that you can use for this. Obviously, one of the most common or two of the most common kind of avatar types that you utilize here
We've
might be
started small, just a
um,
few joint clinics.
like a HeyGen or a Synthesia streaming service that you can utilize. But what we've done here is essentially amalgamated the AI video tool like that, but also built that into like an AI agent with a language model sat in the back end to support then that conversation that I can have with this avatar and with this with this in this instance a healthcare professional, and start to go in and have that conversation as well. And at the end, I could go in and ask this question, and then once we finish this scenario, I can then go in and get some coaching based on my performance, based on how I've done it. Obviously, I've just written some pre-written responses there from my end, obviously, and it's responded to those because it's based obviously on the AI tool. But again, what this starts to do is it starts to take and elevate their empathy, or the way they have those sales-based conversations, or the way that they interact with people. And so from our perspective, really what we want to do and achieve here is give learners that opportunity to do that in a safe space, do that without having the kind of fear of blundering in front of a customer or making a mistake of upsetting an employee or a colleague, but actually doing that in a safe, interactive environment like this. And again, as we said, the way that this looks and can be, I think, Meg, you talked about that in one of your questions. How do we get that formal experience? Well, the driver behind this, utilizing a video-based AI engine here alongside obviously the chat functionality, is to give that formal experience. But within other organizations, the conversation has been, how could we use more 3D characters for this? Or how could we use more 2D? Because again, that aligns with our company culture. And again, I'm sure represented in the 200 people or so we've got attending today, there'll be a real myriad of company cultures and different tones and designs that will work well. But again, the key thing here is, how do we drive behavioral change based on allowing the learner the opportunity to practice and simulate, and then obviously get coaching off the back of that as well. So yeah, really, really exciting. So I'm sure we've had a couple of questions. Did I come through? Sorry, I just had a message maybe saying I wasn't coming
It
through.
came through okay on mine, so I'm hoping it did for everyone else, but fingers crossed. To come to the point around the accents with the avatars, this one we chose US accent for because the majority of the audience were going to be in US, but absolutely you can, depending on the different technologies you're using, you can get UK accents. I think we did one the other day where we used Welsh sounding voiceover. So absolutely you can go for different regional dialects and everything.
And sorry, just to nerd out if I can on the AI piece. What's really cool is that also you can train your AI based avatar to respond in different languages. So again, within that's typing, but there was a mic functionality within that where you can utilize your microphone to speak. The AI can detect the language that you're speaking in and then be prompted and trained in the back end to respond, to your learner in their native tongue. So in that instance, like, that's really cool. So yeah, I suppose it goes beyond US or UK actually, that you can go even further. I'd suggest in that instance, which is really cool. So sorry, just to nerd out a little bit, but yeah, great questions coming through, and hopefully I think this is going to be a real exciting movement, I think, when it comes to digital learning. The only challenge, and I will call it out, is obviously the whole piece around AI governance, and it's the cart leading the horse, isn't it? We've designed this to integrate specifically with lots of different AI policies within organizations. We almost need to, in one sense, to be kind of AI agnostic, in the sense that actually different organizations will have different language models signed off. Some organizations don't have language models signed off yet, and so it's a case of waiting and thinking about how can we kind of prepare the ground for that. But often it needs to be at an organizational level that an AI conversation like that happens, and then it's a case of, as L&D communities, how do we then take and harness the environment and run with it in the solutions that we create and the innovation that we use for those as well.
Absolutely. If it's all right, what we'll do is questions in the chat, please absolutely keep them coming. What we'll do is we'll come back to any other questions that come through at the end, just looking at the time. The last two things that we almost wanted to run you through is thinking of that, almost the Kallidus quote that we gave you at the start of what innovation means to us, is now looking at the other side of it. So instead of the cool solutions that we're creating, how can we kind of take approaches that we've done before, do them slightly differently, using the innovative technologies to almost like unlock the stuff that maybe was previously out of reach. And the first one we wanted to talk about was unlocking dynamic design. So we've talked about few ways to kind of enhance the experience. And I think visual design, especially with that discussion that we said we've seen happening on LinkedIn a lot recently of, is it worth investing in? Visual design is such a huge part of that. And to share our side of things, we think absolutely it's worth using these innovative technologies to try and bring greater, more dynamic designs to life at a lower budget. Because while content is absolutely king, the visual design has a huge part to play in the almost like the emotional response that people have. So, no matter how much we were all warned growing up, we all absolutely do judge a book by a cover. It's an innate human response to things. So if we can design a course that looks really inviting, it looks really intriguing or dynamic, it invites you in, it makes you want to explore, it will do exactly that. It will have such a huge impact on if people want to engage with your training, or if they see it very much as like I'm just going to click through to get through this as quickly as possible. And then obviously because of the emotional response that it generates, that has such a link to your memory, and therefore to if people can understand and then retain the content we go through. Also, when we're doing learning solutions, narratives play such a huge part in what we do. And obviously the scripting of those is important, but the visual side, how we immerse learners in those narratives, is really critical to bringing those to life accurately for more technical content, but also just in a much more engaging way and a much more immersive way for more kind of thematic metaphor concepts that we're trying to get across. And then finally, the part that design is always really good for is trying to like transform the untouchable into something to explore. So obviously we've all had kind of like complex processes, and we've used graphic design to make them feel more tangible. But where the more dynamic designs come into play is if we need to show specific kind of actions, human responses, maybe even slightly hazardous processes that we need to demonstrate how to actually do, but we obviously don't want to put people at risk by doing that through video, and maybe 2D doesn't quite do it. This is where things like 3D can become really, really impactful. And obviously it's previously been like a really expensive thing to do. So we just wanted to kind of show you through almost what we can do with that nowadays with the different technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, as we've done with all of them, think about the impact of this. Before jumping into some examples, we've utilized kind of AI within, creating high-end and rich experiences, but also created those rich experiences to really impact, engagement and therefore effectiveness of the training that we've seen. We recently did a big health and safety transformation for a large organization, and actually the kind of the star rating that they use internally went from completely, it was text-based, a lot of kind of information heavy training material, and we completely revolutionized it and utilized lots of 3D animation, big experiences, with kind of simulations, and went from 3 stars to 4.8 stars. And you're like, well, that's great getting some feedback, but actually the thing that really got us excited was actually the impact of that engagement. Was obviously knowledge retention is higher, and therefore impact is higher. Again, practical, we're able to see things in a practical light because of that 3D animation. And we saw a 40% reduction in employee liability claims in the first 6 months, and obviously reduction in incidences as well. So again, something that gets us really, really excited. And then let me share my screen as well, because I'd love to then show a couple of different examples.
Yeah, because there's definitely always I think especially when you say 3D, a lot of people sometimes think about the slightly janky looking characters, the kind of like the uncanny valley effect, and actually the quality that AI can now help us produce is fantastic.
And so just to call out, and hopefully you can all see my screen. Is that coming through all okay, Lucinda?
It's not on mine, but I think it's just my computer, and I've seen this a few times before, so you're all good as long as everyone else can. There you go, everyone else has got it.
Lovely, lovely. Appreciate the wider verification. But this was all of these scenes that you're seeing here in front of you. Hopefully it's coming through okay with the Wi-Fi. All of these are created images from our 3D design team. But what we've done is we've utilized AI to animate all of this. So none of this is human animation. All of the animation that you see around the train moving, around the design, around the, just the nuances of like the camera panning, but also if you think back to the beginning in terms of like the wave movement that you can see on the shoreline, all of that is driven and powered by AI, which is just super, super exciting. So again, as Lucinda said at the beginning, innovation isn't just about going further than we've ever gone before, but it's also taking what we knew before was possible and making it more cost effective for organizations as well. We did have another example to share, but Lucinda, I'm conscious of time, so I'll hand back to you because I'd love to make sure we get to the far bit as well. But again, just in terms of innovation, how it can play out, I think for us it's really exciting. It allows us the opportunity to create high-end things for cheaper, which hopefully elevates the experience of everyone involved.
Absolutely. And the last part of that are very much along the same themes that we'll just run through in a couple of minutes so that we can make sure we've got some time for some more questions and stuff at the end. It's just thinking about translation. And, you know, we've all obviously been translating modules for a very long time. We're all very aware of what the blockers can be. It's expensive. It takes a long time to do. So sometimes we kind of, you know, leave it to the side. We just wanted to very quickly highlight almost why we think translation is something that's really worth looking at the innovations within to use, because, you know, especially thinking of, for global organizations, the need is obvious. But actually, if you think of single countries now like the UK, we've got so many different languages. And there's so many benefits to making sure that everyone can access the training properly. So it obviously improves the learning culture because everyone feels like they've been included. When we translate learnings, it means that people can focus their cognitive energies on the content itself, not having to try and translate it for themselves in their own heads first, and even potentially risking them translating it wrong. But also it does really accelerate people's understanding. You know, we've all got like a mental schema in our heads of the things that we already know. Learning is really impactful when we kind of connect it to those things that people are already familiar with. When we do it in someone's own native language, it means that that's much kind of clearer for them to subconsciously do. So it really accelerates their understanding. So it's really beneficial across a range of fronts to be translating learnings across as we go. And the tool that we've been working on, that Kallidus' own special little feature at the moment, has some real benefits in what it can do to make this a viable option again.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose just to give context to the tool, this is something that we're building. Yeah, it's a Kallidus product. We're building it in conjunction with another organization that we are one of our customers. But what we've seen, one of their main challenges around translation was it costs loads of money and it takes loads of time. Two headlines. And so we were like, great, how do we create a tool that enables you to save time in terms of the file prep? You know, they've got hundreds of files that need to be translated. How do we save time during the translation process? And how do we do this all in one place and save ultimately loads and loads of costs as well? So let me share my screen here. And we can jump into that as well together. Perfect. Has that come through for everyone? I think it has. That's
Even
great.
I can see it this time, which is nice.
Even you can see it. Wonderful. Gosh, we know we must be onto a winner. Perfect. So what we've created here is a bit of a dashboard. And I want to call out when we say AI translation, I'm sure lots of people will give a sigh and be like, gosh, heard it all before. And absolutely, so have we. This is very different to that. This is an opportunity and a place and a tool where you can come in and you can, of course, harness the power of AI translation, but you can also, it's a technology product that enables you to translate really quickly in the flow of work, almost instantly at any type of file. So this tool works with adapt files, rise files, media files. We're doing at the moment, we've got a PDF editor that we can see here. And we're doing, at the moment, we're currently in development for Storyline as well. So really, really exciting. And it can also within it, the differentiator with things like Storyline or the articulate AI translation mechanism is it does all the implementation for you. It's cheaper, and also the final thing is it does AI and media components as well, which is really cool. So just give a demo of how it works. So again, we've uploaded our SCORM file. That's all we need. We don't need the Storyline file here. That's this. All we need is the SCORM file for this. I will upload the course. That's been uploaded into my courses section here. So I can go in. Let's go in and see this wonderful example of a module that we can go in. So here we go, the Kallidus Innovation Webinar. We can click into it. So again, just using the file type, just using the SCORM file, I can go in and expose all the text, which is great. Now, if I go in here, we can see this select translation section. So I can go in, I can pick a translation. Let's pick German. German's one of the biggest files. Let's go in and view. Hopefully that all comes through and works. Oh, that's not worked. Let's try once more, but we've got a backup test just to be clear. We'll do it once more. Let's go this time into Spanish. Let's just make sure it works. Um, View content learning. Right, that's not worked, which is a little bit frustrating, but we'll get into this one. We'll click into our quiz edit. Let's change this one into Spanish here. We can view this one. And that should come through nicely. Here we go, perfect. So we can see the module that we've got here has been completely translated into Spanish, which is great. That took what, 3 seconds, obviously with a few failed start attempts at the beginning. That's wonderful, and you might be like, great, but obviously my reviewers need to go in and tweak the content. They need to edit the material that exists as part of this. So what we can also do, again, only using the SCORM file, is I can go in and actually we're able to, with our technology, go in and expose any of the relevant text that sits within it. Again, and I can edit all of that. I've got the text here. I can compare it to the English. And so I can type in, hello, everyone. I can say
Absolutely what this does is it tries to make the whole translation process almost end to end a lot more kind of quick and easy and everything to go through. There are loads more functionalities that we've actually got embedded into this that we would love to take you through, but just being conscious of time and wanting to make sure that we can get to a couple of the extra questions that have come in at the end.
Yeah.
I'll just bring my screen back over very quickly
Absolutely.
to run you through almost as a very quick wrap-up piece where we would always recommend kind of ending the session and also ending any innovations you do is almost coming back to the learning needs analysis stuff that you found out at the start, making sure we're then measuring again off the back, how did all of that land? And again, please feel free to take a screenshot or a quick grab of this screen. Again, it's by no means comprehensive. It gives an idea of just some of the things that we would recommend looking at and measuring so that you've then got the fantastic argument of, did the innovation work? Where do we want to innovate again in the future? And coming back to some of the questions in the chat previously of how do you convince people to let you do some of these more innovative approaches? Dip your toe in the water, try one of them, prove it works, and then you've got a far better case for being able to do it again in the future and making sure that as you do it again in the future, that it's really impactful. So essentially, thank you for bearing with us with a slightly speedy wrap up towards the end. As anyone who's been on a call with Jack and I know, we are very good at talking about these things. It's definitely our passion. So if you would like to continue any of the conversations, you'd like to see any more of those kind of tools in a bit more detail, or you just want to kind of chat about some of the pieces we've gone through, please do feel free to reach out to either of us. But for the last few minutes, also very happy if there's any more questions to come across in the chat or in the Q&A piece, just to let us know. We'll try and answer as best we can in the last few minutes that we've got.
Yeah, I suppose just to take Lucy's question, which is on the screen there. So obviously, what's your experience been with gamification and AI with employees who are, less on their laptops and computers? Really honestly, it's been really good. Think about where the most of our games are played. They're not played on laptops. They're played at home on consoles, or they're played on our mobiles. And so the way that we thought about that, again, it comes back to the beginning bit. Who's our audience? What's the use case? Where are they going to be taking this? It's about, as we do that, designing the games to be as kind of consumer grade in their design and their thought process as possible, rather than, maybe a game that's going to be laptop based. So again, I think we've had really good feedback from that as well. Just to answer that question, Lucy, and then I can see we've got a couple more questions as well. Are these tools going to be available in Kallidus? So yeah, Jamie, thanks so much for your question. These tools that we've looked at are all part of our bespoke content offering. But yeah, more than happy to kind of share any details around that as well. That's kind of a slightly separate part to the Kallidus systems that obviously I know millions of people around the world obviously are using as well. Yeah, thanks everyone for the great feedback. That's great. Perfect. I don't think. Oh yeah, we've got a question around kind of costings. It's a slight cop-out answer, but I'd say everything that we've seen today ultimately is a bespoke solution. So I mean, there's a real range. As if anyone here has bought or been part of a bespoke content project, there's a real range of what can go into that technology. I suppose the great parts, hopefully the last two are, the 3D animation piece and the AI, the use of AI obviously dramatically bring down costs. But it's probably pretty hard to say at the moment what the costings of each of those solutions look like. We tried to give a real range, so the templated games versus the bespoke games, and then obviously those AI bits as well. But yeah, more than happy obviously to pick that up in more detail if that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm just having a look to see if there's any more.
I think that's all the questions that have been in the chat gone through. If there's any we've missed, please do feel free to kind of re-chuck them in so that we can see them.
Lovely. Lovely. Great. Well, look, thank you so much. And I suppose for the 54 still on, one of our things that we would recommend doing is try that experimentation. Try small, innovate, and capture data. That's the key thing for us is we get out of bed and we get excited by making impact within organizations. So, do try this in small, safe ways where there's that autonomy and feedback, capture data, utilize data tools to support you in doing that as well. And let data tell the story as you then plan to innovate. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for the session. Really, really value the insights. And Lucinda, thanks for your inputs and thanks for bearing with the technology as well from my end. But yeah, look forward to catching up with everyone on the next session.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Joel.